Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, yeah, number is growing. Welcome all. Some new faces and certainly some familiar faces over the past 3 days. I see several returning customers, so to say, to the third and last session of our webinar week on online assessment. And as you are probably aware of, that we started 2 days ago with assessment design and assessment futures, followed by yesterday the trust, privacy and ethics. And today we are going to focus on operational processes, technology and support. And yeah, this is the final element that we also cover in the in our publication on design of e-assessment. And maybe Stefan, you can put the link once more in for those who are new into this group, because this publication is really important to find all the challenges, the approaches, and good practices that we have made inventory of in the past year. And like I announced before, there will be follow-up by a website, a dedicated website to add good practices for the years to come. And we also invite those who are participating in these sessions to come forward with good practices, and we will make sure that they will be uploaded to the website. For this afternoon on operational processes, technology and support, we have two speakers. One is Carlton Wood. He has written also the chapter in the same title in the book on e-assessment, the report of the special interest group. Followed by Kirsi Saarinen from Tampere University of Applied Sciences, TAMK, with a good practice and an example of digital tools. So let's start with Carlton.
Thank you. No. Thank you very much indeed, George. If I just share my screen. Hopefully.
Yeah, we see it.
Hopefully people can see that okay?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you very much indeed. As George mentioned then, my name is Carlton Wood. I helped co-author the report around designing online assessment, and my particular aspect was around the operational processes, technology and support. And I know that not everyone here will have been to every single session throughout the week. So I've taken the liberty of purloining a couple of slides that Klaus Dieter presented earlier in the week, just to give people a quick idea of the sort of scale and where this sort of came from. So the special interest group came together in January 2021. There was a whole number of different meetings with a number of different members in there from a number of different countries as well. We asked people to contribute a number of good practice case studies, and from those case studies and from some of the contributions that people made in the actual individual meetings, we came down to sort of 4 focus areas that we've been talking about during this week.
Can I shortly interrupt, Carlton? We got a question in the chat. If you can put it on full screen. Sorry, on this. If you can put the slides on full screen, maybe with F5 or so. If that's, then we can read it even a bit better.
Hang on.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Is that better?
Yeah, perfect. That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So we collect together various bits of information from either that were in the meetings themselves or from some of the good practice case studies. And they divide it into sort of 4 main areas, some of which you've already heard about earlier in the week. And the one that I've highlighted here in yellow is the one that I'm going to be talking about today, the operational processes, technology and support. There's the link on the right-hand side to the actual final report if people haven't got it. And as Klaus Dieter mentioned, basically, the future is already here in many ways. The pandemic gave us a sort of heaven-sent opportunity really to sort of trial online assessment in a bigger way than we've actually already been able to do. And many of the distance teaching universities have already had exams and assessment from home. So in many ways, we're the best place to sort of lead on this. And what we've seen during the pandemic, building on work that has happened sort of before that, is there's all sorts of different solutions out there to online assessment. and some of the sort of features I'm going to try and talk about today. So first of all, I'm just going to start off with a bit of a thanks to everyone who's contributed to the special interest group, because basically without their inputs, we wouldn't have anything to go off. As I mentioned, they've come from a number of different sources. It's either from sort of case studies that people kindly provided, or from direct contributions that people made. We collected people's thoughts and ideas during a sort of Padlet sessions in some of the earlier meetings. And what we did is we distilled some of those common themes into the 4 themes that I mentioned. And what we're going to try and do here is highlight some of the sort of key ideas and practices that have that happened as a result of the pandemic, but some of the things that we can carry forward as well. So in terms of operational processes and technology and support, there were sort of 4 main areas that came up, and they're highlighted here in the bullet points. So the first is, how did the institutions organize themselves to deliver what was required? Many institutions looked to see what they did already in a face-to-face environment, and then looked to see if they could adapt that for online delivery. So that was the second point. Clearly, in doing that, many areas needed to make use of various aspects of technology. So that formed the third point: to what extent was technology deployed to assist in delivery? And also, whilst all this was going on, universities had to support both staff and students in being able to deliver these new processes. The fourth aspect. So I'm going to structure this sort of presentation around those 4 points. So first of all, how did institutions organize themselves? So I've taken a screenshot of one of the case studies. This happened to be from the Open University in the UK. It's the one I know best. But what was done here was quite similar to what many other institutions did. They typically formed some kind of overarching university group because they needed to make changes to tuition and assessment. They made some kind of sort of policy changes and then had to operationalize those policy changes. And what they try to do is then sort of link all of that into making sure it's sort of communicated effectively. The key things that came out of this particular section was the fact that the pandemic sort of struck rapidly, meant that rapid responses need to be made. We picked up a lot in the special interest group that somehow everyone else thought every other university had it already sort of planned. So there's quotes like, do universities have do they already have frameworks and guidelines for online exams ready to go? The answer was no. So quite many organizations had some of the answers, virtually nobody had all of the answers. And it was quite clear that very few places had got some kind of sort of previously prepared process they could just go to. So everyone was sort of learning on the process, as it were. That previous example of the good practice highlighted 6 themes as to why their approach worked pretty well. And if you look at the reasons behind that, those 6 themes there: common purpose, the urgency, listening and being heard within that group that was set up, linking with students, making sure the students had a voice, making sure that whatever decisions were communicated effectively, and making sure that all of the decisions were sort of empowered by having some kind of sort of cross-university membership. All of that helped those kind of bodies develop and set policy. So clearly there was some kind of sort of nuances going on there depending on each individual institution. But the real tension that we picked up was that what everybody was trying to do is sort of summed up by this quote at the very bottom. They were trying to create meaningful assessments, measuring high-level thinking levels, but they don't take up too much faculty time to grade, give feedback, which is probably what we're trying to do most of the time, isn't it? But particularly, during the onset of the pandemic. So what people tried to do was try to adapt their face-to-face delivery, because that was the obvious thing to try and do. And clearly, many of us have spent many years sure that we've sort of finally honed our delivery of assessment, so it works well in a face-to-face environment. So could we just take what we had and put that on in terms of online? And that was a bit of a challenge. We've got one here, quote from Universidad Technica. So what they've got to do, pretty much what's summed up in the bullet points, is take what they had in a face-to-face environment and try and convert it to an online means. They considered 3 particular elements: the students, the evaluators, and communication. and they work with the technological systems, and that will come out again later on in the talk. But this is the kind of thing that was happening sort of across the board, across all universities at that particular moment in time. So the interesting thing was the way the different universities went about trying to tackle converting this face-to-face provision to online. And there was quite a bit of evidence that people gathered together sort of expertise within their institution. So they brought individuals already demonstrated expertise and experience in online delivery and used those people as a source of information for others. More often than not, universities tried to have some kind of approach that gave guidance, but what they weren't able to do was just make sure everybody did that, because one size fits all was never going to work. So more often than not, they give some kind of flex in the system. So although there was direction, overall direction, there was a bit of flex to allow people to sort of tweak what they need to do for individual sort of subject areas. And so we're left with quotes in terms of the fourth bullet point down is that large-scale proctoring took place in one faculty, open book exams in some of the other faculties. So it was very much sort of horses for courses, depending on the individual areas, but directed from above. And the other bit that came through really strongly in this section is you probably expect, if you're going from face-to-face to online delivery, you needed to make sure that the sort of IT sections within universities were brought on side and could sort of help this particular process. So hence the quote at the very bottom, Education Development Department sets out a framework, provides a checklist, goes to an IT department for working protocols to see if that's all fine. So you could tell very early on that this couldn't just be a sort of simply an academic thing. There needed to be the sort of IT side behind it. And that led on to the third point as to what extent was technology deployed. And looking at this, this was probably the one single area where we got most feedback on in this particular chapter. And I think it was because people were having to use a whole range of different solutions in different ways. There were 5 themes that really came out in this particular area. The first one that struck me was the sheer range of solutions that were employed. I think it of an element of desperation, because we had this very fast time turnaround, so people had to come up with answers really quickly. So they tend to look around and sort of see what was available. That was reflected in the sort of second bullet point, is that people sometimes went for things that already developed in-house and they knew that worked, but also they were happy to go and pick up things that were available commercially as well. One element that came through many times was around the deployment of technology, particularly around sort of proctoring and plagiarism. And this was partly affected by individual countries in which country they were in, but also the sort of concern that was expressed by students around this element of trust and some other factors that was quite big brotherish, and they were being checked up on. But that was matched to some extent by the concerns to make sure that whatever mechanisms were in place to present assessment could be considered to be sort of valid. But say fourth bullet point down, a lot of the changes that were introduced caused concern and anxiety among students, we were hearing, and part of that was linked to some of the problems that were encountered with technology. It was either students were uncomfortable with the technology being used and actually being able to use it, or they were uncomfortable with what it implied. So for instance, if there was some kind of heavy duty proctoring going on, that they were sort of concerned about that. The bit that was quite interesting for me was the way in which technology was used in different ways. So I've picked the idea of Zoom as an example here, and I've given 2 quotes. So in one institution, it was reported that the use of Zoom as a tool to support the student and visual supervision of the process in a synchronous way. This way I can verify the identity of the student. So they're using it for that particular purpose, to know who the student was. But then the same technology in a different institution was oral examinations are replaced by online Zoom sessions. So it was the same technology, but you've been used in different ways. And I guess it's what you'd expect, but it was interesting how people adapted the technology in different ways. I mentioned earlier on that some had to use what was developed in-house. others used commercially available software. Some took time to rapidly develop new in-house solutions, and we heard yesterday about the AVEX system. So in many ways, the pandemic and the situation made people develop new ways of working. So here's a good example coming from UTPL. That little GP2, by the way, stands for good practice too. So if people want to sort of know more about this, if you go to the report, that's the good practice 2, and you'll be able to sort of locate it there. But this is a good example in the way in which they used Zoom, sort of commercially available tool, to basically evaluate who a particular student was. So the student came in through Zoom, and then they were then allowed to then log on to the university system and in order to sort of complete their exam. So it's a good example of using sort of 2 different tools, one commercially available, one developed in-house. The other thing that was interesting was there was quite a bit of evidence that where solutions were developed, they weren't just necessarily developed for a single institution. So there's a report coming in from Finland that they've got a national-based approach to develop a national platform for e-exams. So again, this is not just sort of something where it's just everything was very insular. Some of the solutions were much wider than that, and clearly the Tesla project that we know quite a lot about, that's another example where, albeit it was sort of beginning to develop before COVID came in, that sort of more than a single institution is involved in that. The one area that did cause a lot of discussion was around either the technologies that institutions use for proctoring, so digital invigilation, if you like, or for detecting plagiarism by students, because there was a lot of concern at the time, because where we had face-to-face exams, often they were invigilated in person. You go online, and then you have to then deploy some kind of digital invigilation to make sure there's no sort of academic misconduct going on. And there was, I think, there was an awful lot of concern, so academic concern, expressed in the sessions about to what extent could we go down this route, and to what extent were students sort of happy with it, or not. There was a big discussion around the sort of the trust side of things, that we should trust students not to cheat. However, we need to have some kind of check in place that they're not doing that, and hence why this formed sort of basis of one of the chapters. And the other bit that came out strongly was the bit around sort of the students being stressed by this new situation. So it's, I guess, hard enough in order to take a face-to-face exam, and then you test it. And then when you convert that across to an online exam, you're still testing some of the sort of knowledge that people know, but you're asking them to use it be tested in a different environment. So we had heard quite a few quotes that sort of students were guided along the process to try and reduce the stress. Is a good quote here, that provide an opportunity for a tryout and to give clear instructions and also feedback on what's happening during the process to try and put students at their ease, because students were quite concerned at times. And the other bit that came out, which was perhaps unexpected for me in some ways, but when you think about it, I guess it shouldn't have been that unexpected. How did universities support both staff and students whilst delivering all of these changes? And it was really interesting because it was quite clear that, as mentioned earlier on, that particularly in terms of the staff, some of the academics were quite used to delivering stuff online, but a lot weren't. So there's the staff element there, but then clearly also there was a student element in terms of having to sit assessment in a manner that they perhaps weren't quite expecting. And then just trying to deliver all of that support also in an online manner meant it was really sort of quite a sort of tricky thing to do. So pull up another sort of case study here from JYU. They conclude that online assessment methods require appropriate student support and technological flexibility. Of these, student support and protection of academic integrity in particular pose the greatest limitations for these methods. And I think that was being reflected from what a lot of other people said from different institutions. The ratio that online examinations and written assignments call for more support and supervision from the part of the educators, and insufficient student support with these methods may be a risk factor for the cessation of studies in online higher education. So students were already stressed anyway, just partly because of the pandemic, because of lockdown in various different countries. But then this was adding another level to that stress. So whatever university could do to sort of support that was very helpful. The interesting thing for me was the way that some of the university went about it, because in terms of sort of supporting students, there was often lots of help and advice around students to make sure that they knew what they had to do, but also what sometimes people did was to make sure that students helped themselves by making sure they had the right software on their computers. They knew the way in which the online assessments were different from the face-to-face assessments. Universities delivered support that was equally applicable to both students and staff, which was quite interesting. So one example would be that a couple of institutions offered telephone support during live examination periods, both for staff and for students, to identify any particular issues that people might have. So in terms of lessons learned going forward, because we were keen to sort of try and have this as a bit of a resource for people that people could dip into. So let's say in terms of timescales, if time is short, do much of what's described in the report, because although it wasn't perfect, a lot of it worked. If you've got more time on your hand and you're looking to say develop online assessment, then clearly identifying the various different tools and processes which would best fit your university is really helpful. I mean, it's fairly obvious, but you know, it's a key point. The other bit is how prepared are your staff for any proposed changes. We've seen that some staff in some institutions are very much engaged with online, others less so, and some lack the confidence. So that's an area that people would need to look at. Unidistance developed their Vademecium, which had a whole variety of sort of support mechanisms in there, and I think that went down. You know, that seemed to land really well and be really helpful. But even when all sorts of help and advice was there, it didn't always sort all of the problems out. So here's a great quote: "There was lots of supported documents, protocols, proposals, GDPR instructions, used case studies presented by experienced teachers to other teachers, but in still many ways teachers struggled." So I think even when you've gone out of your way to sort of help people, even that in itself might not be enough. So making sure that people feel well supported and you're aware of what the areas are that people are lacking in confidence in is quite helpful. And clearly also we should question ourselves what we do in a face-to-face environment and then simply converting that across. Is that the most effective approach? Because what we were picking up is that sometimes it works quite well, but in others it doesn't work. So you've got to identify what it is you're trying to do, link that to the learning outcomes, see if it can be assessed as well online. If it is, fine. If it isn't, you have to sort of adopt your approach. And I'm going to leave it with one final quote. This isn't from the Open University UK university, but it's pretty much what we have done. So we built a pilot project to evaluate pedagogical challenges with online exams. This will lead to a report and guidelines and final strategy and regulations for the next academic year. And that's exactly what we've done at the OU UK. And I think it's what a lot of other areas are doing. They're building on what we've established over the last 2 years. Start off with that slide from Klaus Dieter saying that sort of assessment future is, I think there's that much going back. I think some institutions will go back to some face-to-face, but they won't go back to all of the face-to-face that they had before, because I think now a lot of academics have seen that some of the online assessment works and works really well. So why go backwards? Why not go forwards? So I will end with that and happily pick up any particular questions if people have got them.
Thanks so much, Carlton. Very clear presentation on the approach there, and the floor is open for questions. You can use the chat or come forward by microphone or by raising your hand. I have a question maybe to kick off. You were indicating that after the first period, the process was assessed, and we learned from that and taken it to the for next year. We enhance the system. Would you know what would be the main lessons learned from the first period?
Well, I think there was a range of different things that people did. So I think everyone was very keen in the first time round not to disadvantage students. So I think in many ways the first time round institutions almost sort of heavily favoured heavily favoured students and gave them possibly more time than they would need. And I think then over time, people looked back at that and then thought, well, perhaps we were a bit too generous in that particular way. So they reduced the amount of time that students had for assessment, and also people wrote assessments in a different way. So I know certainly at our institution, when the pandemic struck, we had virtually no time. So we basically took the assessment that we had for a closed book environment and just presented it in an open book environment. Clearly students did much better on that, because you'd expect them to. But by the time we came to a year later, we'd had time to sort of change some of the assessment to write it so it was more suitable for an open book environment. So I think there was partly sort of a time angle on this, but also an angle of working out what works best in a sort of certain situation.
Yeah. Thanks. Any questions from the audience? There were no specific challenges. Maybe this question comes because we also had a task force on diversity and inclusion in parallel to this special interest group. There were no specific challenges in relation to diversity and inclusion or specific target groups you think by organizing online assessment? I can
cite an example from the OU UK, because we've just had a report where we've looked at the data from 2020 and in 2021, and it looks as though for all of our protected characteristic groups, the awarding gap has decreased for all of the protected characteristic groups. And the bottom is we're not actually quite sure why, which is really interesting. And it's quite significant, and it seems to be sort of across the board as well. And it also appears that good for sort of some of the sort of groups where it's been quite hard to sort of to reduce that gap over time. So particularly say for black students compared to white students, at the OU UK we've had a heck of a job trying to sort of reduce that gap, but we've seen a sort of 3 or 4% drop in the awarding gap, which is great, but it's now trying to sort of understand the reason why. It's somewhat fortuitous that this particular shift has caused that, and the university as a whole is trying to put a lot of work into this kind of area. But there are not that many examples in my experience where you can do a sort of a single thing and it has like the desired effect in this kind of area. So it's a real interesting one as to why we're seeing that effect. I don't know if anyone here has got some examples from their institution where they've swapped between face-to-face to online and seen something similar. But we're really interested in why this is, because it means that we're looking to sort of develop online exams going forward. And I've authored one of the governance papers putting this forward. And in the evidence, we've cited the fact that it caused a change in the awarding gaps, because that's actually quite a powerful piece of evidence to sort of support what we're trying to do. But when the obvious question then is, well, why? We don't know. But we're a bit daft to go back to face-to-face and take the awarding gap back up again if we, But it's a real effect, because we've seen it over two big presentations now, both in 2020 and 2021, and it's across a range of different subject areas as well.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know, and difficult maybe afterwards, but the only way to learn about this, what happened, is maybe also with asking students why they think they had a higher scoring there. Also, if they are aware of why their results were improved.
Well, we've done Klaus, Dieter, and myself are involved in a big sort of survey with our Institute of Educational Technology colleagues, and one of the things that people say is that they find it far less stressful doing a home-based exam compared to a face-to-face exam, because you've got the sort of stress of traveling somewhere to an area that you don't know. So particularly those students, I know, with mental health difficulties or mobility type issues, that stress is taking away. So clearly the exam's going to be stressful anyway, but if you've got to make them go somewhere where they don't know, you're going to elevate those levels of stress, where if you say you can take those exams at home, that element of the stress is removed. And so it may be that people are just a bit more relaxed and being able to think a bit more clearly. But it's difficult to say, I think. George.
Yeah, that would make sense, indeed. One final question from my part is that we have seen the assessment design and the trust, privacy, ethics issues and the operational processes now. What is your experience? Are they discussed in the institution in parallel together or in a sequence? Because can you be operational before you have solved the assessment design and the trust issues?
I think if you've got knowledge of the report, you discuss them in parallel. I think if you don't have knowledge of the report, you may well discuss them in a sort of linear feature. It's interesting. I'll just go back to the sort of survey. If we ask students, we did ask students in the survey, if as a result of going online, do you think it's easier to cheat? Or do you think it's easy for other students to cheat? And there's like, they go, yes, by 70–80%, they say, but would you cheat? We're all like, no. So it's like, it's always, but then the interesting thing is on this particular survey is we asked what they would be prepared, what system would they allow the university to put in place and be happy with. So we're talking about things like sort of digital invigilation, sort of screenshots and the cameras being on them, this kind of. And interestingly, a very large percentage of students agreed with us of those impositions. I was quite surprised. You're talking sort of 70–80% of students would be content to go along with it because they think it would sort of protect the integrity of their exam, which is for me was quite surprising. I thought the figure would be quite low because students would be really worried about the sort of privacy type issues. I mean, on the free form text type comments, they said they were concerned about that, but they could see why the university would have to put them in place. So I think those kind of discussions are occurring, but I think it may be one of the things where the universities probably have to some extent to put some of these kind of things in place, because I think it's one of the biggest challenges towards the online assessment is that, do we actually know, in terms of student identity, do we know the person who's taking the exam is who we think they are? And also, if they are taking the exam, can we actually assure ourselves that there is no academic misconduct going on? And I think those are the sort of kind of two reasons that I've heard sort of play back to me in my own institution while we've been sort of trying to push online exams is, like how can you get a good handle on these two factors?
Yeah, thanks. So it's also a big part of acceptance. Even if they have trust issues, there is always still a way of acceptance, considering that there are no other options, or this is the best option. And also from the chat from Baron, I see that if students can pick the mode of assessment that fits them best, that's always the best way. If you have the choice of doing a face-to-face exam or an online exam, then you can fit the one that is where you feel most confident in.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, that, because I guess it depends on the sort of size of the institution and the sort of complexity of it. I think we've contemplated that the OU UK, but the problem with it is that if we give students choice, it makes it operationally more difficult to then enact. So I'm not saying we wouldn't go down that route, but I think it does make it, But the other point that Baron makes about giving the chance for students to sort of familiarize themselves with the systems is absolutely spot on. The more things you can do like that to get students used to what it is that you're asking them to do, I think the better.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Carlton. Very clear. And
no problem.
Yeah, thanks. We can then go to our next speaker with Kirsi Saarinen from TAMK University, talking about the Digimento network, digital tools and support at TAMK.
Yes, I'll just share my screen. Okay, can you see this?
Perfect. Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. Okay, hello, good afternoon from Tampere University of Applied Sciences. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this Digimento network we have here at TAMK. My name is Kirsi Saarinen and I'm a senior lecturer here at TAMK, and I'm also currently a team leader of language and communication teachers. First, I would like to show the structure of my presentation. First, I'm going to tell you briefly about TAMK, because that's the context. It shows where this Digimento network is. And then something about the Digimento network, naturally, its resources, and then also benefits for teachers. And then I'm going to tell you a few details about Teaching and Learning Center, because they are in a way connected together. Digimento network and the resources, links, materials, they are also provided in Teaching and Learning Center. And then something about digital tools to support teaching and learning, what are offered at TAMK. Just to give you a few examples. Okay, bear with me, I'll start with TAMK first, but that's the context I'm going to show you. Need to do that. Yeah. So in Finland, TAMK is one of the most popular universities of applied sciences, and we are renowned for being a multidisciplinary educator and innovative partner with a strong orientation to working life and international collaboration. And together with Tampere University, we constitute this Tampere University's community. It means that in 2019, Tampere University and Tampere University of Technology, they merged, and TAMK, Tampere University of Applied Sciences, also became part of this community. And in Finland, we are the second biggest university of applied sciences. We have over 10,000 students at the moment, and there are over 40 degree programs, bachelor's degree programs, master's degree programs, English in English, and of course in Finnish degree programs as well. And we have approximately 700 specialists in teaching, research, development, and innovation, and also in support services. And then TAMK today, well, being a University of Applied Sciences, we focus on working life in education, as well as research, development, and innovation cooperation. In a way, it affects also teachers. Here at TAMK, teachers don't necessarily only teach, but we also take part in projects, development projects, and some research projects as well. And then TAMK also offers a diverse and multidisciplinary environment. I already referred to that earlier, and lifelong study options. And then we have these 5 schools here at TAMK, and they are listed there: built environment and bioeconomy, business and media, industrial engineering, pedagogic innovations and culture, and then social services and healthcare. In that pedagogic innovations and culture, I, as a language teacher, I'm working there. There are also, well, other language and communication teachers, and then also mathematics and physics teachers are in that school, music, and then also School of Professional Teacher Education is in that particular school. Okay, and then moving on. This is a picture. I'll move on to this Digimento network, and this is the picture of, well, a ball, you could call it, or the curling stone. In my opinion, it looks like that, but actually it shows the place and the effects of the Digimento network. And I'm going to explain, give you more details in a few moments. It shows clearly that the Digimento network, it's inside the higher education community, this Tampere University's community. So it's inside there, and it also affects faculties and schools. So the flow of information goes to many directions. And I'll concentrate on the dark purple area next. So the Digimento network means that there are 30 Digimentors across the community, meaning the whole Tampere University's community. And at TAMK, we have at the moment 10 Digimentors, meaning that there are 1 to 3 Digimentors per each school. For instance, in this pedagogic innovations and culture, we have 3 Digimentors at the moment. And in this Digimento network, the network brings together representatives of faculties from the university and schools from TAMK to share knowledge and good practices from the perspective of their own field. And I'll explain that in a few months. And then knowledge and ideas are shared to promote the appropriate use of digital technologies and thereby support learning, research, and community engagement. So that it will affect the whole, not only teachers, but the whole community. Okay, and then about the Digimento network, what actually they are doing. So the peer support network work, well, the idea that they promote digitalization in faculties and schools, and I already mentioned that. And then, of course, the aim is that they encourage to utilize digitalization, and then also to support the use of digital tools and disseminate best practices. And this is the best part in this Digimenter network or Digimentors, that they are teachers from the faculties and schools they work in. Meaning that they know about the digital tools and digital environments, but then being teachers themselves, they have that particular pedagogical knowledge in their field. And in a way, it affects that they are accessible for their colleagues. For example, in my school, where I'm working, one of the Digimentors is a language teacher. And if a language and communication teacher has a problem, he or she needs some help with a tool. For instance, he or she wants to know how to use some tool, which tool to use for assessment in a course. Digimenter can help right away because he knows the pedagogical aspect in language teaching and in language learning, and he can right away suggest a really good tool for assessment, for instance. And then again, through discussions with the Digimentor, he can also ask good questions and then also get answers from the teacher. And at the same time, of course, he will learn. But this is really helpful for teachers. They don't have to worry about whether the person they are asking help for in order to get some digital tools, for example, they don't have to worry that the person doesn't actually know where that is actually where that tool will be used. Okay, I'll go back a bit, back to that curling stone. And there in the gray area, it says that higher education community. Well, the basic idea is that the aim is to improve the flow of information between different parties, not only between Digimentors and teachers. Digimentors are coordinated by the Education Development Services at TAMK, and we at TAMK we have 2 Digimentor coordinators who are responsible for Digimentors and their work. And then Education Development Services also provide the resources that are allocated to Digimentors. Okay, and then about Digimentor network resources. Here is the slide. So what do they provide, this Digimentors or this network? Well, they have this digital toolkit. That's a website maintained by this network, and it features over 100 tips and good practices. And I will send you this link in few moments. And then they also they have this Moodle area. I'm not sure how familiar you are with this Moodle, but that's the learning platform which are used at TAMK. and in Tampere University's community. And Digimento network, they have their own Moodle area that offers support and examples on using Moodle. If there are some particular tools we want to use and practice, that is the area where these are actually taught to teachers. And then they also have this monthly newsletter, and they offer trainings, and then there are news posts and publications and etc. I stopped sharing for a while. I'll send you this link. I was talking about this digital toolkit, so you might find this helpful. Hopefully you got that. And I'll also share my screen. And I'll show that if you can't open that link. It looks like this. So this is the English version. We have this also in Finnish, but it includes tips by tools, and there are some examples given, and tips by activity. It says here, for instance, are you looking to expand your assessment strategies? And you can just click on this learning activities, for example, learning activities and assessment, and it provides some tools, and you can just check what is how you can use them, polling with Zoom and Plinga activities, and so on and so forth. And then the idea is also that if you have any tips you would like to share with others, you can add them here. And then a list of Digimentors are given, of course, so that teachers can find the one if they don't know who those are. Okay, and then back to the slides. And then benefits. I have already in a way referred to this, that what are the benefits for a teacher, for example. For example, if I have a problem, I can contact the Digimentor right away, and then we can meet and discuss the problem together. And then I already mentioned this, that because they have this pedagogical knowledge in their field, like language teaching and engineering, physics, because there are these different Digimentors, they have different backgrounds, and they can work with the teacher suggesting, for example, those particular tools. I'm going to teach in August online fast track English, and that's a course for engineering students and healthcare students. And I had on Monday I had a meeting with one Digimentor, and we went through that course and we discussed the assessment part, because I would like that to be really transparent for students. So we went through some tools which we could use, which I could use on Moodle, and we are going to continue with the discussions in August. And then also this accessibility, because that is something we need to bear in mind and take into consideration when we teach our students. And we went through that also in our discussion in order to make that online fast track English Moodle platform accessible for students. So that is also the area you can talk about and discuss with the Digimento. Yes, successful. Yes, that is really successful for one teacher. If there's one teacher who needs help, assistance, or a group of teachers, for instance, language teachers, we have had some trainings. We have been shown many tools, what to use and how to use them, and in using them with different languages, whether it's in English language, Finnish or Swedish, how to use them. And then teachers in one school can have some particular training. Digimentors can attend meetings and have their presentations there. There are some guidance and sharing practices, and then these separate training sessions. And this was something mentioned to me on Monday, that each Digimenter can decide how to use the resources, meaning that each Digimenter works in a bit different way. Some Digimenters can have more training sessions, and some Digimenters can have more one-to-one teaching with teachers. And then this is I mentioned already at the beginning that I'm going to give you some details about this, or show you this teaching and learning center. That's the one here in our university's community. And this is a public website, and I can also send you this address, inviting the community members to develop, share, and get networked. And the goal is to support anyone teaching or developing teaching work. And this is in a way connected to Digimento network, in that way I mentioned that earlier, that TLC provides a variety of topics. There are links to materials, also links to this Digimento network. So higher education teachers can choose materials what they need. If they have interested in assessment, for instance, there are particular parts related to that. And I have added here one example, digital pedagogy, which can be found there in Teaching and Learning Center. Here's an example related to that part. So if a teacher wants to plan teaching where he uses digital environments and tools, and here are the steps of the planning of teaching, and it's divided into these 5 sub-pages. So you just click on those and you can get information, materials, and links. And that this is really, really helpful for many teachers. And then finally, the last one, what we are offered here at TAMK and in Tampere universities, services. So in the middle, there are the ones which are available. There are quite many. And then there are other available services which can be available upon request. For instance, ThingLink, Mural, House Space, Spark, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, external services. With those, we need to, of course, make sure that they comply with the terms of use and institutional rules and so on and so forth. But that was actually it. The ones I wanted to tell you about Digimento network. If you have any questions or any ideas you have in your mind that you want to share with us, so please.
Thanks so much, Kirsi. Thanks. Very clear and really impressive support structure that you show there on digital supporting digitalization. I saw some questions in the chat. One of the first I saw was, how do you become a Digimentor? Do you apply for that? Are people appointed?
I think in the original idea that there are, well, you need to be interested in that, and you need to have the expertise in that area. So I think originally there are who would be interested in taking part in this, and then they were chosen, these Digimentors.
Thanks. And I saw Carlton, maybe you can take the microphone on that. Some questions there from you.
Yeah, I was just interested in do you have any sort of training or staff development for your Digimentors to sort of, presumably they must have a sort of certain level of knowledge to be selected in the first place, but then how do you enhance that going forward? They
meet well, once a month or more often, and they train together. They visit places like if somebody finds a really good learning environment, digital environment, they get familiar with that, and they visit some places also, and ask and share knowledge and experiences. And in a way, they are highly active in this. So everybody, and then it's not only at TAMK, because there are Digimentors in university also, so they in a way work together and learn from each other.
That's really interesting. Well, I've just got the microphone. I can have one more question, George.
Yeah.
So I'm just interested to know how do you follow the use of the Digimentors in any kind of way? So do the Digimentors keep a log of how many times they're contacted and the kind of issues that come up? I
think so. I'm not that familiar with that. So, but I think so. I can find out and let you know.
Yeah, I'm just interested because I mean, because it may be that there's, for instance, that all the Digimentors are being asked, being asked about one particular thing, and that would, for me, would suggest that that TAMK then needs to sort of put something on for everybody in that kind of area, rather than asking all the Digimentors to talk to a load of people about it.
Yeah,
so I'm just interested if there's particular themes that come out and how TAMK sort of follows those through to know that that's a big issue.
I think there are the themes, like for instance, the Digimenter, who is a language teacher, he might, there might be some different themes compared to the one who is like being a Digimenter for engineering teachers, for instance. So there are differences in that.
Yeah, I guess that. But yeah, I'm just because it would be interesting to know just sort of stats behind it and just seeing if the use of increased or decreased over time, because you can see I guess it could increase, couldn't it? If as more and more people become aware of it, I guess it could decrease as people become more familiar with technology. So
yes.
Yeah, it could also be helpful to when this system is monitored to see what expertise is additionally needed to do an investment in gathering more expertise from outside the organization or so on, so that things that come to the agenda over and over again. And then, of course, because it's a topic of innovation, to keep up to date on that and be part of networks internationally, nationally, on further developments there.
So they participate in conferences also. So they, in a way, international conferences and national conferences. So.
And was it triggered by COVID, or was it?
No, it was. Well, I think that has had one effect, but in a way, digitalization, that is the main area in strategy at TAMK and in Tampere University. So in a way, it was not only COVID. That was not the only reason why it was established, but in the digitalization in all in all, that was the idea behind this Digimenter network.
And, is it then an ambition to go with the programs to digitalization of the education as much as possible, or what is the ambition here?
Yeah, but that will be increased. That is something in a way teachers are encouraged. Digitalization, more and more courses online, and develop something regarding assessment, for instance. And that is something we are language teachers. We are struggling with the oral presentation and oral skills, how to assess them if there are more automated courses, for instance. So how to do that and how to make sure that the oral language skills are assessed, evaluated in the right way.
Yeah, really interesting, and I think many other institutions envy the system, struggling with the challenge by transformation to further digitalization. Mm-hmm. Any questions from the comparable systems or from the audience? No, and I think then we have come to the end of this session, meaning also the end of the whole webinar week on online assessment, which I experience as very very useful, very interesting, and also new ideas, new perspectives came forward. It's really interesting to I think all 3 days, and it's a topic that is really well. We did more than scratching the surface, but there was a lot to be further explored, and we will do so then also within our information website on online assessment. It's not the report only. We will continue working on this, and we hope also this year to building on the good practices here and strategies and policies, also to come to a kind of a template on building a strategy and policy on e-assessment that can be used by universities European-wide, and indicate what elements need to be brought to the table when you're discussing developing e-assessment or enhancing your e-assessment approaches. So I think a lot was to be learned from these sessions also, and we certainly take this further as we indeed concluded that e-assessment is not going away, is there to stay. I want to thank all speakers of this week, and especially also from this afternoon, and for the participants. We hope that you stay active in this field and also approach us when you have further information and good practices on this topic. Thank you all so much, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.